I stopped speaking Korean when I was 8 years old, and now my grandmother is dying without knowing who I really am. My parents moved us from Seoul to Boston when I was 6. They enrolled me in an American school where the kids called me Ching Chung and pulled their eyes into slits when I spoke my native language. By 2nd grade, I refused to speak Korean altogether. My mother would ask me questions in Korean. I'd answer in English. When my father demanded I speak our language at home, I'd stay silent through entire meals. You'll regret this, my mother warned. One day, you'll want these words back. But all I wanted was to blend in, to have the other kids stop looking at me like I was from another planet. I practiced my English until every trace of an accent disappeared. I became Jamie instead of Gabmin. I learned to love peanut butter sandwiches and pretended Kimchi smelled strange to me. My grandmother lived with us but never learned English. As I abandoned our language, we grew further apart. The woman who once told me ancient Korean folktales before bed became someone I communicated with through nods and gestures. Sometimes my mother would translate between us, but it wasn't the same. The translation stopped because there wasn't much to say by high school. I was fully American on the outside. I had the right clothes, the right friends, the right accent. I dated a boy named Matt who didn't know I could speak another language. When he came over for dinner and my grandmother said something to me in Korean, I pretended not to understand. The hurt in her eyes was immediate, but I looked away. In college, I took Spanish to fulfill my language requirement. My Korean was still there, buried deep inside me, but I ignored it. When other Korean American students tried to connect with me, I distanced myself. I don't really speak it anymore, I'd say with practiced casualness. My parents didn't teach me much. Last week, my mother called. Grandmother had a stroke. The doctor said she had days, maybe weeks. I flew home immediately, sitting by her hospital bed. I held her fragile hand while she slept. My mother stepped out to speak with the doctor, and suddenly my grandmother's eyes fluttered open. Jimin, she whispered in Korean. Is that you? For a moment I considered calling for my mother to translate instead. I took a deep breath and reached for the words I had buried for 20 years. Yes, Hamononi, I answered in rusty but clear Korean. It's me. Tears filled her eyes. You remember, she said. I never forgot, I admitted. The truth of it, hitting me for the first time, I just pretended to. For the next hour I spoke to her in our language. The words came back slowly, then in a rush, imperfect but honest. I told her about my life, my dreams, my regrets. I apologized for the years of silence. When my mother returned, she froze in the doorway listening to us. Speak later. She hugged me and whispered welcome back. It took me 20 years to understand that erasing a language means erasing part of yourself. Some things can only be said in the tongue you were born into, like telling your grandmother you love her before she goes.